So my book before Freedom was called Tribe. And one of the things that's so compelling about the idea of tribe, of community, is that people will readily die for it, risk their lives to protect their community, their family, their children, other people's children. And I was trying to think of, like, are there any other sort of human values that people are willing to risk their lives for, to die for? And freedom is the other one. And freedom is so closely bound up with human dignity and with our sense of being, leading a meaningful, powerful life. And I just thought, and it's such a misused word, the word freedom is so misused and so poorly understood. I thought, I'm going to write a book called Freedom about what freedom means and how we attain it. In most of the animal kingdom, there are hierarchies run by alpha males, alpha females sometimes. And there's really no escaping that. If you're not a dominant individual, you really do not have autonomy within that group, particularly, say, chimpanzees that we're very closely related to. But with humans, it's different. We are very possibly the only mammal or a smaller individual or a smaller group can outfight a larger one and maintain their autonomy, even in the face of a much more powerful foe. You just saw the Taliban pull that off in Afghanistan against the United States military. So I wanted to write a book about freedom and how, throughout history, for the last 10,000 years, how groups have managed to maintain their autonomy. Of course, the first tactic to remaining free, the most obvious one, is to run. The book's divided into 3 sections: run, fight, and think. And staying mobile is a very ancient way of maintaining your autonomy. The Apache remained autonomous, remained free for 300 years or so after contact with the Europeans because they were so mobile. Their wealthier neighbors, the Pueblo societies, were rolled by the Spanish immediately because they were sedentary. The Apache were not. If you can't outrun your oppressor, you're going to have to outfight him. And that's where this amazing human ability to outfight a larger opponent, a more powerful opponent, comes into play. And I looked at the dynamics of how that works from one-on-one combat. I used mixed martial arts as an example, and boxing as an example, where size is not a good predictor of who wins a fight. And I went all the way to, say, the Montenegrins in the 1600s. The Montenegro is a wild, mountainous region in Eastern Europe, and they were invaded by the Ottoman Empire. And the Montenegrins were outnumbered 12-1, and they still defeated the Ottomans. And then finally, if you're going to maintain your autonomy, your freedom within your own society, you're going to have to outthink the forces in your society that are oppressing you. And I looked at the labor movement about 100 years ago in this country and how very disenfranchised, exploited, often foreign textile mill workers were able to mount protests in the streets and get laws changed. And they faced down the US government and the National Guard and corporate interests, and they did it. And one of the ways they did it was by incorporating women into the movement. And once you put women on a front line in a street protest, the soldiers, the police, are way more reluctant to use deadly force. They do it sometimes, but they're way more reluctant to. And that tipped the balance. And one police captain said in frustration in Lawrence, Massachusetts, during the mill strikes, he said, "One good cop can handle 10 men, but it takes 10 cops to handle one woman." And that was when they managed to start to change the dynamic and eventually win that fight. And embedded in this story of freedom is an experience that I had. I took a 400-mile trek, a completely illegal one, along the railroad lines from Washington, D.C. to Philadelphia and then west to Pittsburgh with a few buddies of mine that had been in a lot of combat like I have been. And, it's totally illegal to these swaths of no man's land. We were sleeping under bridges and in abandoned buildings and cooking over fires and getting our water out of creeks. We called it high-speed vagrancy. And it was a very physically arduous thing to do. We were carrying 60, 70 pounds and constantly avoiding the police and all kinds of things. But we enjoyed an unparalleled freedom out there. As I said in the book, most nights we were the only people in the world who knew where we were. And that's a very important form of freedom that I was lucky enough to experience.